and welcome to the Beginner's Handbook. I'm Jordan.
I'm Jamie.
And in this episode we're going to be talking about getting your regular group of players, or people that will run it for you.
yeah, that is exactly it. So whether it's trying to kind of muster a group out of thin air, or whether it's that you've got a group of people in mind that you would like to start playing a game with, whether again it's playing a game with them and somebody else running it or you're running it. We'll be talking about those kind of different situations and kind of different things that are kind of some way between those two. But to start off with, I think what we'd like to know is do you have a regular group just now? And by regular group, what I mean is that you're playing games with them on a frequent basis, or are you looking for a frequent group, or do you flit in and out of groups, being part of a group that is regular but then bouncing off and making guest appearances elsewhere? So you can let us know. So if you're on YouTube, there's comments underneath. If you are not, if you're listening to us on some podcasting platform out in the ether, then there's different social media that we've got about. So there's Discord there, where we also have a looking for group. So you can go in there and hit anybody else up and potentially see if there's somebody out there that suits you. So there's that there. There's Facebook as well, and every kind of big social media platform that's kicking about, we're somewhere, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I'm pretty curious about, and we'll probably speak about our side of this, but if anyone's listening that's already got a frequent, or a regular group that they actually play with, we'd like to even hear how that started and how that kicked about, because our experience is probably quite different. And then I've had different experiences making or kind of getting involved in other groups that I play with. God forbid that I break up our normal group and play with others. But it'd be nice to actually see how other people have met up, whether it's actually been online you've started getting into the hobby. Maybe it was through... Maybe it was in person, you've been invited, which I think is a bit less. I hear that less, or happening less. But
I suppose it sort of depends on when you've started. If it's been during 2020 to 2022, chances are it has been online because everybody's been stuck at home. Whereas if it was 1984, then probably it wasn't the internet, unless you're some sort of time travelling genius.
Yeah. But one thing as well with Stranger Things being out over the last wee while, it was shedding a light on D&D, so maybe we'll see more people getting into it after all these seasons that they've done. I think they've done a lot of it in whatever the latest season was.
Yeah, and again, kind of sort of TV show before that I can kind of think of off the top of my head, like it's called The Big Bang Theory. Again, it featured quite a lot in that, so I think that's probably been a sort of modern peak of it. And then I don't have any stats here, maybe somebody can help us out there, but maybe in my head it's possibly tailed off a bit, and then it's kind of peaked again with the Stranger Things large live stream show.
Jamie's favourite.
My favourite. And other stuff like that, again, Stranger Things, lockdown, the internet. But yeah, it'd be kind of interesting if somebody somehow tracked that or done a survey or something. When did you first start playing? How did you get into it and things? But anyway, that's a different topic for a totally different day. But,
I'm hesitant to actually say it, but potentially if you're on Spotify there'll be a poll for it, because I've seen there's polls on Spotify and stuff. I forgot to tell you about this. You can do polls and things for your episodes. So, Ben, we would like to hear how you guys got your regular groups. I know some people get into regular groups and sometimes you're like, I'm out of this, see you later. But that's okay too. If you've had an exit strategy for one, I'd love to hear that. I'm really interested in that. But that's the kind of general questions. But I think then, just to kind of kick off, I think for me, Jamie, what for you? What's a regular group, a D&D or any role playing group?
Yeah, so for me, regular. I'm probably kind of elastic on what counts as being regular. So a lot of people, to me, when you say regular or frequent or whatever, that's what they think about. Think about frequency. They think about time. So they think once a week or once every other week or every single day for 8 hours or whatever. It's a really, really kind of short time period between games. For me, a regular group is that you've got kind of 90% plus of that group at every game that you're at. So the actual time period between the games isn't too important for me, because different people with their lives have got different things going on. They could be married, kids, working shifts in a job, or whatever it is. So a frequent group to me, a regular group, not frequent, is hitting that kind of 90% mark with that group, rather than you spend 50% of your role playing time here and 50% of your role playing time here, or whatever it is. So a frequent group, I would say, is a regular group. I keep saying frequent. I would say is kind of in that sort of higher percentage mark. And again, it's maybe not as high as 90%. It could, if you've got two groups that you bounce between, and again, that could be regular because you're splitting the biggest chunk of your time evenly between those two groups. But that's the kind of thing that I would think as a regular group, rather than that you're doing it again in a sort of time-based thing. But what about yourself? How do you see regular groups?
I think kind of the sentiment behind all that is kind of very similar for me as well. I think when you say regulars, my mind goes to the pub regulars, and that is every week. But for me, I think the thing that's, what would be our regular group? It's like, but with our group, it's like, it is like the same people, like it's there every single week. There's a group of guys, another group that I'll maybe speak about them in more detail later about how we came together, but it's generally the same faces that are coming now. Give or take, there's now about 10 or 11 people in that group, and god damn, it gets unmanageable, by the way, at least at busy games. One of the games I did here actually didn't have enough seats, which is actually where one of my chairs broke.
I was going to say, you definitely don't have enough seats now.
I'm now another seat down, but I literally sat like in my living room. It's like a big long living room, and I've got a kind of big desk or table, like dining room table, and there's seats around the whole thing.
Similar to this one.
Yeah, exactly. Well, for the YouTube people, similar to this one. For the audio listeners, where the mic is sitting on top of.
For the audio listeners, similar to that one.
Yeah, that big one. So there's plenty of seats around it, but the issue was I'd ran out of seats, so I had a bucket chair and I was practically in the middle of this living room, and I was shouting, like standing over everyone with a laptop in one hand. It was way too much, man. It was really hard. It was a difficult game as well on top of all of that. But anyway, that's for me, what's a regular group is actually less about how frequent you do it, although I think it's actually the consistency is the big one. So even if it's like, you only play every couple of weeks, once a month or once every 6 weeks, whatever it may be, having that consistency is going to be nice, because it's the same faces you see. I think that for me, that's a fundamental bit. It's the same folk you're seeing, even if you've got some people that dip in and out. That's okay. I mean, that doesn't mean I'm not a regular, It just means that's what they can commit to, and that's fine.
Yeah, and again, when it comes to being a regular, you've got kind of a couple of viewpoints. If you've got a group and you've got somebody that's there and they make it every second or third game in whatever schedule you've got, looking at it from your viewpoint, you might not view them as a regular because they're only there every second or third time, and that in your eyes they're a kind of a guest player, or whatever way you want to think about it. But flipping it from their point of view, going back to that kind of percentage based thing of their time, if you look at it, well, if they're spending 100% of their time always going to their games, from their point of view they are a regular at that, because that's where they're committing their effort to. And again, with different people, it might be that you know, with some people that they literally have got a very small amount of time and then they're giving you all their time, and then with other people it might be that there's just not as big a desire there, so that that's why they're kind of in and out of games or whatever. But again, that's the way that I would kind of look at it. Or one of the things I would say to people is remember that, you know, there's two sides to it. There's the group's point of view and the people that are there, and then there's the kind of person who's not necessarily a main member of the group and their point of view as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that at least for us, that's what kind of sums it up. And if anyone's listening or watching and has a different opinion, let us know. I mean, at least this is just our experience of it. I mean, I've got a few different kind of groups of guys that I've run or play 3 or 4 games a week at the moment, and it's going to go down at least by one, so that'll be nice. But they're all different groups that I play with, and there's some that's family and there's some that's pals. Well, actually, the rest of them are pretty much pals. And one of them's like a local comic shop group that got together just through playing at a comic shop, and we played most Mondays, or most Mondays at least. And early on, I was certainly running all of those games. But so I think that's our our definition of regular groups anyway. So I wonder then if it would be good to actually hear, I mean, we know this, but I would like to hear your kind of how we became regulars. Like, how did we get our regular group of people if it's just our guys? What's your kind of thoughts on that and how that came about and stuff? I'm just curious.
So my version of events is...
Nobody wanted Jamie to play, that was it? He just tagged himself along.
I just hung up. Is that you guys? No. So there are, at the moment, there's basically 4 of us. Although earlier on there was a larger number, and I think we'll circle back to this at some point, probably just when the conversation drifts on a little bit. But basically, one of that group mentioned to everybody else that they'd like to try it out, and that wondered if we would turn up and we'd play and see how it goes. So the kind of background context for that is all of us at that point, there was 6. So the 6 of us, we had all went to high school together, so we all knew each other, and this was maybe 2 or 3 years after leaving high school. We were all still in touch, albeit that there's only 4 of us that are frequent players, going back to that, and we all decided to try it out. So we done 1 game, and then we done the kind of follow-up game to that. So kind of 2 or 3 games in was that kind of original kind of testing the water sort of campaign. Then after that, I think at that point we kind of went down to about 5 at that point for the next 2 or 3 games, and of those 5, the 2 that would drop out to leave the 4, they kind of drifted in and out between them, and that's how the 5 was made up. So that was another campaign that went for another maybe 5 or 6 games. So that whole period maybe went over a couple of years, I think.
I
so
think that's right.
The games were done maybe once every other month, roughly, and sometimes a bit longer, I think, and then there was other times it was a bit shorter, but kind of averaging once every 2-3 months, and then that's roughly what happened. Then we get left with the 4 of us, and then we done different games. It wasn't just D&D, it was D&D originally, then we done 1 or 2 other games, then we kind of ended up in the sort of lockdown period where we've done our kind of longer campaign and we've played kind of more frequently. So bar maybe a kind of 1-2 month period in like 2020 and a 1-2 month period in 2021, we've played kind of once a week on average from that point, the 4 of us, and pretty much always the 4 of us being there. Occasionally somebody would drop out for whatever reason, whether it's family stuff or work-related things or whatever, but in general, our kind of our average attendance is probably about 96% or something between the four of us. So that's pretty much our whole sort of history of this particular group to this point just now when we're recording.
Yeah, I think probably out of the 4% that we're not kind of notched down has probably been me for that 4%.
3.5% or something.
Yeah, it's quite funny. It's certainly something that, was it 2017 or something actually? I thought it was 2019, but that's definitely not right.
Well,
it was definitely before we started, I'm sure. I can't remember. It's been a long time anyway we've been playing.
I'm thinking it's earlier than that. And
I've got 2017 in my head.
I don't have anything to base that on.
Aye.
Other than I'm thinking, well, we left school 2012 and it wasn't initially after that. In fact, when did you end up in Paisley?
Aye, that was...
When did you first move in?
It was a long time ago. Anyway, it was 8 years before 2 years ago. So 2012, probably 2013. Was it for 8 years?
So if you say 2013,
aye.
Maybe 2015. That's
so it's
vaguely ringing a bell.
Yeah, so it's been a while that we've hung out, and really this group came out of literally the guy that we spoke about came in and said, "Oh, do you want to try playing D&D?"
Oh yeah. So, sorry, I think the kind of point I was driving at there was that we were a group of friends. One of our friends said, "Would you like to play this?" And then we agreed, and then it went from there. I think that was what I was supposed to say.
I mean, one of the things though with it is it's funny because I remember him being quite surprised by it, but then I suppose, but for me it's like you've probably if you've listened to the podcast before you'd know this, but I played like Call of Cthulhu and stuff way before then. Wasn't super avid at it or anything, but I'd played quite a bit of it. Just for quite a long time, just through one of my family members who it turns out loved all that stuff. I used to play D&D when I was a lot younger, but moved towards the dark side of the occult and all of the cosmic stuff. But and the guy actually said, "Does he want to do it?" And we're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Yeah, I play Call of Cthulhu." He was like, "What? You do?" And then it just became us playing for however long it's been now, a long time. So I pretty much, I would say that's probably that's how I remember it as well. It's very much like, just do you want to do it? And we all just said yeah, because what's the point in not trying it out? You know, that was really our attitude by it. Although I'm sure maybe, no, I didn't have, for me, I remember thinking about D&D and going, it's a bit much. It's a bit too nerdy for me, even though I'd sat and played Call of Cthulhu. But I found D&D was like more complicated and it was fantasy. And I'm not, at least at the time, wasn't really that into fantasy. Not that I didn't like it, just didn't indulge it in a lot of it. The same as sci-fi, other than like the core alien films and stuff, which is like the lo-fi stuff. I hadn't really got my feet in those genres, so, and I like horror, so that's why I was okay with Cthulhu-based stuff. But I was happy to try it. It ended up being a dead fun game. We all get the Red Plague or something, I think.
Yeah, I can't.
Might have been my fault.
I can't remember, and I think in the previous episode we ended up kind of debating who actually had it.
Yeah,
I think
inconclusive is the answer.
Much like I was trying to figure out when we started playing officially. I think every episode as well that we've recorded from the first one, I think we keep shaving a year or two off. Yeah,
but then it's also the start of the Big Dwarf campaign, which we've mentioned before, that we can never. I think it was 2019. No, it doesn't matter what year it was. It was 2020. I checked.
Definitely 2020 because
I
it was definitely
it was during
the
lockdown.
I thought it was the first one that we played during that period, but as it turns out, it wasn't. It was maybe the second, third game in.
I didn't realise it was as much as that. Games during lockdown, but. In terms of like becoming or like getting a regular group, that's certainly our experience, and like one that I've got is kind of different. There's a group of guys I've been playing with for a year now. It was a year as of today, exactly today. It was the 13th. So a year ago today, we've been running the same campaign. We actually wrapped up the Act 2 of it kind of last week, but we actually got together slightly different. It wasn't like what somebody said, "Do you want to play it?" It was actually one of the guys, I can't remember if we had a conversation around D&D or it came up, I'm sure, and one of them had said, "Oh, we've all wanted to play D&D, or I've wanted to play D&D, but because of my crazy work schedules and like 4 on, 4 off, or whatever it is, 5 on, 5 off, they could never find groups that would actually kind of
Accommodate them.
it would be like join when you can, but that was as best as they were going to get, and that was like once every 6 weeks or something. So I ended up never kind of doing it. And speaking to one of the other guys individually, it was like he had the same opinion or same feeling, and one of the other guys said I was up for playing it, just never thought about asking folk. So once it kind of came up, I said, well, why don't we try a game? Just give it a go and see what you think. We'll do a one shot, and if he's like it, we can see if we want to keep doing other games. So, and that it was a one shot that I wrote, and it turned into a whole huge campaign with loads of thousands of words, tens of thousands of words in it. But that's certainly like just becoming regular. It isn't always somebody that says, hey, I want to run games for you, and he's all go, yes please sir. There's other ways of doing it, and I mean definitely you could always say to someone, do you want to play D&D or whatever, insert RPG here, and they might say yeah, and then you can say, well, do you want to run it for us? Less likely to get that to happen, but it certainly happened, and that's fine if somebody wants to volunteer to run it.
Yeah, and I mean that's not quite what happened to us. So with us it was, our friends decided that they wanted to do it, and because they wanted to do it, they'd kind of put in the background research. What do we need to do, how do we get about doing it? And then because they'd figured that out, they then turned up to us and went, do you want to play it? So they approached all of us as players rather than as potential DMs, GMs, whatever. So they kind of had their battle plan, and they kind of went with it at that point. And like Jordan's saying, it doesn't necessarily mean that is exactly what you need to do. You could turn around and go, like, if you know that somebody is like a decent storyteller, whether that's they're into poetry or they write poetry, short stories, whatever. If you know that there's any kind of thing like that going about, anything creative going on, then they're a good shout to approach to see if they want to come up with a story to then run as a game. So I think the kind of main thing is if you've got a potential like group of candidates, if you like, from your your personal life or through work, school, college, whatever, then figure out what they're all like as people, and then once you've figured that out, then you'll probably get an insight into where they fit on the spectrum of player, DM, or if they're kind of floating about in the middle somewhere.
Yeah, it's certainly worth kind of looking at. I think that kind of leads us quite nicely into kind of what's your thoughts in kind of if you're needing to either look for or start. We maybe do starting a group, because that's probably the hardest, and looking for groups is pretty easy. We can summarise that pretty quick. But if you wanted to go and start a group of, let's say we stop playing D&D now and we're never playing it again, how is it you go about, if you wanted to keep playing it, finding that group of people that might become your regulars or your regular group?
Well, it ultimately kind of depends on, I think, how good you are at reading between the lines. If you're naturally quite good at getting subtext when people are talking, you go, all right, although somebody said that they were fine, you actually kind of pick up that they're a bit ticked off at something or whatever. If you're good at that sort of a thing, naturally your intuition is probably going to be pretty good. So if you're that sort of a person, then probably go with that more than, right, well, I know for a fact that the person that I work with mentioned that they seen the Lord of the Rings once, right, I'll go ask them, right, they kind of bin that side and rely more on that. So top of the tree would be intuition if you're good at that. If you're not so good at that, or you're a bit unsure of yourself in that situation, then at that point figure out, well, what what is each individual person that you're potentially asking like. So again, if you know that somebody naturally is into fantasy type stuff, so whether that's Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings or whatever, well, they're probably going to be a good D&D candidate. If you know that somebody's really into Star Wars, Star Trek, whatever, well, they're probably a good candidate for something like Stars Without Number. If you know that somebody's into kind of horror type stuff, then they're probably a better candidate for Call of Cthulhu or whatever. So knowing what game you want to try out is going to give you a hand before you start looking for your group of players, because then what you're doing is you're matching the system to the players rather than the player, or sorry, you're, am I saying that the right way around? I've kind of tripped myself.
Yeah, matching your players to the system.
Yeah, so you're matching the players to the system, not the system to the players. So you know that that's what you want to do. So you know that you've got enthusiasm behind it, or at the very least some curiosity there. So if you can find people that will more than likely want to go down that route, then you're more than likely going to find players which are going to be similar minded to yourself, and it should create a decent atmosphere at the table and so on and so on and so on. Kind of in order of priority, a kind of who to find out and who to ask, depending on what your family situation is like, because again, families can be very, very varied. If you are a competitive family, maybe not the best choice to look at first of all. Monopoly boards getting fired across rooms and all that sort of stuff. So depending on how your family is, they might be a good first kind of option to start looking through. And if you're on the more competitive side, then maybe look out with your family, maybe put them at the bottom of that pile. Next best sort of group to look through is friends. Then sort of next best group from that is friends of friends, if you kind of roughly know who they are. And then at the bottom of that, probably work colleagues or people that you're at school, uni with, whatever. And again, that just all kind of sort of makes sense. You're working from the people that you spend the most time with down to the people that you spend the least time with. Very bottom of the pile is just going out in the street with a big placard and walking up and down until you gather enough people, I suppose. But yeah, and through doing that as well, then hopefully you know your friends pretty well, which means that you, going back to that original point of figuring out what they're like and then getting them to match up with whatever game you want to play. And the kind of, other than getting people that you think are going to like a particular system, which means that they're more likely to say, right, when's the next game, rather than you're looking at their watch the whole time. The sort of next thing down from that is going to be, how they actually are in terms of like to get on with and things. So if you've got, again, whoever it is, family, friends, whatever, if you know that they are going to be understanding that this is the first time that you're putting something together, or again, if you're a more experienced player, if they're going to be understanding that to properly get their head around the game is going to take a bit of time, is going to take a learning process, then again, they're a decent candidate to try and get on board, because you know that if there is going to be a little hiccup at some point along the way, which there will be, I mean, even if you're professional, there'll be hiccups through, going slightly blank on a particular rule or stat or whatever it is, or whether it's, more profound than that, and it's you just have got no clue what it is that you've been asked, or what it is that's supposed to happen next. Then if you've got somebody that, again, is naturally empathetic or whatever, then they're going to be a better choice for you for doing or for assembling that group, just because they're gonna cut you some slack. Whereas if you've got somebody that, again, is again, maybe naturally more competitive or whatever, they're maybe not a good choice for a sort of first group. Because if they're competitive, then they're going to be approaching D&D from the kind of, right, okay, so we start off, this is what we've got, and you get given whatever the quest is, so they're focusing on accomplishing it, which, ultimately at the end of the day, that's what you're trying to do, but that's either their sole focus or their main focus to accomplish the quest, rather than maybe having a kind of slightly more balanced, and I'm using inverted commas for balance there, a balanced approach where, they're focused on achieving the goal, but they're also, staying alert for different other things that are popping up during the game, different side quests that are popping up that actually might make the main quest easier to complete, or might actually give a clue, which then leads to a decision to abandon the main quest because it's actually an ambush, or whatever's happening plot wise. If you've got somebody that's not as competitive, then they tend to kind of look at the bigger picture rather than get too focused down, and that's kind of a through experience thing, because I'm quite competitive in things naturally. So when I was first playing D&D and getting into it, that's originally why I thought, I'm not 100% sure whether I'll be a regular player if I'll end up committing to this, because at the time I thought it seems a bit vague, a bit woolen, and I'm not quite sure if this is for me. But then through time and things, it's ended up a different story. But I think that's kind of the sort of main things that I can think of just now. Is there anything else that you would think for gathering a group of players physically?
Yeah, probably. I think actually you're talking about the competitive. That can be. I know what you're saying. I know some people that have joined maybe first time, and they treat D&D like it's Skyrim, and then they fight with everybody at the table, like not like really bad or anything, but it's like clearly they want to be better than everyone. It's like it just doesn't work, and that's maybe more up to you. If you're newer to playing or running games and you're trying to get a regular group of players, it's something to consider what sort of game you're running and how clear you're being about that game to them. But I think actually this is a bit more of a U-turn, not a U-turn, but a kind of sidestep from kind of getting a group of D&D players. But actually one thing you said that I think is important, because it's not really that hard to find a group, but I mean it's really about the shotgun blast, the people at least you want to play with, and you just ask them, and maybe don't overstretch yourself, maybe get a handful of folk at most, and just see, because people will dip in and out based on their interests, like what you were saying with yourself.
Probably a good starting number is 3 to 4 players.
And I probably wouldn't go much higher than that at all, not for the first session of guys. You want to make sure that everyone gets on. That's partly why I've got a couple different groups, because I know these guys don't like these guys because they've met each other before, but I also know, like, if the games that we do, the other guys that I run with, they like to just drink and get smashed, whereas I know our guys would probably really hate that, so there's these different groups for different, like, gaming reasons, but also because it's different friend groups too.
Naturally that as well. And going back just quickly before you carry on with what you're saying, the 3-4 kind of player maximum for a new group, I would probably stick to that if it's a new group, because even if you're an experienced DM and you know what you're doing, you've still got 3 or 4 people that are sitting there that don't know what they're doing, which means your time, like if you've got one new player there, then they're getting 100% of your time, and then if there's other players there that are more experienced, then they get what's going on and they can either pick up a bit of the slack, or they don't need as much input from you. If you then get 2 new players there, then that 100% of your time to keep an eye on them is now down to 50%. If you've got 3, that's now down to 33%, and if you've then got 4, it's then down to 25%. So every single time a new player pops up, then the time that you've got to make sure that they're getting on okay and you can steer them through things is dropping quite drastically.
Yeah, well, that's one thing as well. If you do it, I'm not so worried about it if you want to have more than like a couple of players, but it's just certainly if you're a new GM, I certainly would not recommend it. But just bear that in mind. If you are going to do more, you're going to have less time for each new player to try and describe the rules. And ultimately, unless you've done that a lot before, and I've been kind of fortunate enough to do a lot of that, but even then, like I had a game, I had like 10 folk, I mentioned it earlier, and there was 3 new players there, and I'm like, we're trying to wrap this tonight because people are going on holiday, and so I was spending significant time with them, you know, but then there was other people that were getting just wrecked, so it was hard to juggle. But just bear that in mind, if you are going to have, generally if you've run D&D games before, you're probably not going to have more than 6 people anyway. But if you've got 6 new folk, like I did a game with 6 new people over Zoom, and it was hard. But things were all really close pals, so we knew that it wasn't going to go that smooth, and it was okay. It was part of the pitch that I gave them almost to play it. Yeah. But just remember that though. I think 3 to 4, like Jamie's saying, that's ideal, because you can sit and mess around and have people not knowing stuff and re-explaining things 10 times. There's plenty of time for it with 3 or 4 people, but as soon as you've got more than that, it's going to get more complicated. Yeah. But just that's you can cross that line if you want to anyway, is if you're going to be doing it that way. If whoever's listening wants to have more than 4 people, go ahead, just bear that in mind. Unless you're super comfortable with the rules, it's going to be pretty hard to make it smooth for everyone, but ultimately if people are interested anyway, they won't be that bothered by it. So I think as well, one of the other things then, kind of circling back, it doesn't actually have to be D&D. D&D, to be fair, it's actually not super complicated. It looks super complicated, that's for sure. Now I suppose we might be a bit biased because we've played it a lot, you know, but it feels everything's got a bit of a framework to it, and it's all very kind of, even though it's a path like leveling system and stuff, everyone's get basically the same kind of cookie cut before they branch off at level 1, so learning the basics isn't as bad. I'm saying that though in comparison to things like Pathfinder, which there's a lot, it's like D&D 5e but way harder, or it's closer to 3.5, or I think it's supposed to be like the evolution of that. It's definitely more complicated, but if you want to just get people into the hobby, you could just try a basic system. Like we recently played Blades in the Dark, and it was a scoosh. I mean, literally, it's almost like just anyone can do it sort of system, at least that, and compared to some of the other games we've played which aren't like that. Or recently I played the guys that I've been running the super long campaign with, and we tried the Alien RPG, which is also, it's got things like stress, so it's almost got the Cthulhu sanity thing going on, but it's got really brutal, vicious combat like Stars Without Numbers, but it's like none of the complexity with them, you know. So you could always just try an easier system to get their feet wet into it. If there's a game that maybe suits maybe what they're after, and what you're after too is the person probably going to be running it. It's one thing to consider. If you want a scary game that's in sci-fi, the Alien RPG is literally a scoosh, and it's not that expensive from what I remember, although I might be wrong there, because last time I seen it was on a sale. I got it on a sale. But if you want to do D&D, that's fine, but I would actually recommend, you know, if you're going to try and introduce people to it, you're probably better doing all the legwork for them before the game as well. If you know what they want to play, just ask them what sort of guy they want to play and make them a character. Don't bother forcing them through character creation unless you want to do a session 0 with them, although it's technical. It depends on the players. You'll know best with the people that you're bringing to your table, I would say.
And again, that's the advantage of sourcing your group in person. Chances are you actually know them. Chances are you haven't walked down the street with a placard.
And good luck if you have.
And good luck. So because of that, it kind of feeds back into that earlier point of figuring out the kind of person they are, and then the kind of game that's going to match up with them, or figuring out the kind of game that you want to play, and then going through the different groups of people that you know and figuring out who would match up to that. So 2 different ways of doing it, but I think they're probably the best two ways of kind of starting off, rather than just going, right, well, so and so's my best friend, so they're going to play this with me, and then, you know, having no connection to what you're doing there and just sort of hoping for the best. And again, if you match the players in the game as best you can, then you've got a good chance of getting a regular group together.
Yeah, I think actually I'll circle back to this in a second, because they're actually getting it, or trying to find a regular group as a player is actually a lot easier. And literally, and I think we've maybe covered this in getting started playing, but I'll just reiterate the key points. And that is actually just go and ask folk, put yourself in the social media platforms, go to your local comic shop. It's super easy, and the reality is, if you don't like a game, you don't need to keep playing it. There's so much on offer there. I mean, there's one of the groups I'm in, I see stuff like pinging on my phone every single day, like looking for a group, running a session of this game, who wants to play it. It'll be 2 sessions or 3 sessions. Or there was one that was in Edinburgh that's saying, oh, we're going to want a regular group and stuff. Now it's quite far away from me, but it's like the option's there if somebody wanted to remote in. You know, some of it was in person, it was like hybrid. Hybrid can be hard work, so good luck to that group. But it's the option's there, so it's worth just going out of your comfort zone a bit if you're not comfortable. Just put in, even just on these social media platforms, even on ours, you can just put, you know, I'm looking for a group, and someone will find a way to match it, or you know, someone will respond, and you'll be able to cherry pick basically what you want. But anyway, going back to kind of making your own group, because that's basically finding one. It's actually not that hard. You'll get there eventually, you know, and find a group you love, with a game you love, with the style you love in terms of the GM. So, but in terms of starting your own group, I think that kind of covers getting it. But after you've got a group of people on board, you know, and they've agreed to your first game, similar to what Jamie and I had. One thing to kind of, I think for me, is about letting people, if you're going to set up a group and play with them and things like that, just like what I've done with this another group, it's okay to have people dipping in and out. You know, you're not going to get, the first people you invite won't be that regular group that you'll have in 6 months down the line, or even longer. Even though everyone we played with, Jamie and I played with right at the start of playing D&D, there were 6 and it became 4, but that wasn't because like people were just like, I hate this. It wasn't like that. It was just priorities changed, and just people just wanted to do different things, and that's okay. But that took whatever time that took. It wasn't like 2 games, you know.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I mean, ultimately, when you look at it, then what you don't want to happen is that somebody feels obligated to turn up. So if that starts to happen, then, like in our case, not that it did happen, but the danger is that friendships start to get eroded because somebody feels that they have to turn up and their heart's not in it, and they're just going through the motions. And then it means that just out with the game, you know, the small things that, you know, wouldn't bother them start to annoy them, and then just everything builds and creates some issues. So you've got that as a potential that can happen. But the other thing that can happen is that in our case, we ended up with 4 people that are playing regularly, so on average once a week, bar some personal thing that pops up or whatever, birthday, you know, holidays, whatever. But what could have happened is that if you've got somebody there that doesn't really want to be there and is kind of dragging their heels before they turn up to a session, then the likes of me, who at the start was completely unsure about it and only done it because it was a friend that asked me to do it, somebody like me who was still kind of on the fence for the first however many games might have then drifted and then never get into this. So if you're pretty sure that it's not something for you, and you've given it a bit of time and whatever else, because again, for the likes of me, just talking personally, I had to give it a bit of time. Again, I can't tell you how long it was because it was so far back I don't remember. Maybe 3-4 games, maybe, just at a guess. Then as long as you've given it a shot and that you're not just you're not still in the mind frame that you came to the game with, you've experienced it, you've experienced a decent range of things from the game, then okay, fine, fair enough. Don't feel obligated to still turn up. Again, if it's a group of friends, then fingers crossed that they're all understanding about that and you're not being forced to be there. And if that's not the case, then maybe you're not playing with a group of friends, or maybe you need a new group of friends. So that's a question that only you can answer. I can't answer that one for you. So don't feel obligated, and again, everybody that's there will understand, because it's not going to be for everyone. And then on the flip side, if you are the person that's brought the game to the table and you've introduced it to friends, be aware of those different things that can be happening, and don't keep bringing it up. Try be smart, try read between the lines. If they're always washing their hair that night, then that's maybe an indicator that they're not that into it. So, decrease the frequency of the invites and see if they're still picking it up and if they're interested. And if that's still not happening, then there's no pressure on them to still be turning up. Just it's not for them, that's fine. If you let them go, then you're gonna have a better, stronger core there. It's like if you've got a plant and one of the flower heads starts dying off on it, if you leave that there, then the plant is trying to send nutrient towards it to keep it alive, but the flowers that are there that are already in bloom, they're then going to start to struggle because that nutrient isn't getting sent towards them. So this now sounds a bit dramatic here. Cut the head off, get rid of it.
Cut their heads off is Jamie's message. Yes, if they don't want to play.
Take revenge on them all. No, so it maybe a bad kind of metaphor that I was using there, but literally in gardening and things, as soon as it's called deadheading, if anybody's interested, you get rid of the head, it then means the plant sends all the nutrient to the part of it that's still there, which then keeps it in bloom for longer, and you get something nice to look at. So well, it's not really a similar thing that's going on there, but hopefully you kind of get the point that I'm trying to make with that, which is if somebody is in the process of going, don't try to keep them there. Just make it as comfortable for them to leave as possible, and then everybody that's left there is going to be even more relaxed, is going to be even more up for it, because they've not got that negative presence about the place.
Yeah, that's something that kind of going off or springboarding off of that, like the guys that I've been doing the year-long campaign with, for us it was a very non-committal, just they want to try a game. Because I knew it's like, I to be honest, there was one person in particular I thought would not be that interested. Turns out he loves it, but my point of it was, let's try a game and see what happens. It's not, we don't need it to be big and fancy, and it's not going to be, I think, I'm not sure if they were familiar with any like streams of an Xbox One or something that somebody kept talking about, but I said it's not going to be that. We're just having fun, it's no serious. And I gave them kind of, I talked about us and how our games can be a different style and stuff, but I said it doesn't need to be like that. We've got our own thing we can do. And then cut to maybe like 10 months later, and we've got like other people that have never played before joining. Now some of them weren't that interested, but I just said to the guys, like, even at the big finale we just done, one of the guys was like, he got asked to come, and he said, Jordan, do I need to come tonight? And I was like, no, if you don't want to, it's fine, like do what you want. He said, you can just come. And it was I said, even if you just want to come and watch, that's fine. Yeah. You can just come and get drunk with folk, because that's what pretty much everyone at the table is going to be doing, So just super non-committal. After about 20 minutes, they kind of went, I'll give it a go. And I'd said to them I'd made characters, so I made it as easy as I could for them. And I think just if you're making your own group, just be aware of that, and let people come in and out, because some people might not be interested and some might. They might say they're sick every week, weirdly. 6 months of the year they're sick on Saturdays. You know, but that's okay. Let them do that.
Precisely 5 minutes past 6.
Yeah,
every week.
Yeah, but that's okay. Just let them do it. You don't need to. I mean, there's not. I've had experience before of invites going out in like group chats and stuff. And one thing I would say, especially like, don't harass an individual to come, especially if. Yep. Assuming you're not missing the whole thing of I can't be bothered playing.
Yeah.
But you can always throw the invite out there, you know, and just leave it open and just get them to come to you if they want to play.
Mm-hmm.
I've always found that's the best indicator if somebody's interested or not, because you say, let me know if you want to play, and then the day before you just say, just checking in, what's your thoughts, and then they'll just say aye or no, you know, because they might make an excuse up, but that's fine. At least you'll figure it out by that point.
Yeah.
It's just allow people to kind of pass through the gaps if they don't want, if they're not showing a clear indicator that they want to keep playing. There's certainly somebody I'd ran recently with, and I'm like, this guy doesn't play any games. He's never played a role-playing game, doesn't even touch a PC other than like his work or a PlayStation or Xbox or anything, doesn't even play mobile games. I'm like, he is not going to want to play this. There's no way he's going to want to play this, especially not after the really hard game they played. And he was like, I want to play more. When's the next one? I was like, what? How did this happen? But then if he said no, I'd be like, or if he didn't say anything, I'd be like, that's fine.
Yeah.
But if he came to me, I went, holy crap, I can't believe this.
Yeah, because...
Maybe it's FOMO. Oh, sorry, that's fear of missing out for those that don't know what FOMO is.
Or for those who were worried that they weren't going to figure out what that acronym was and they were worried about missing out. But yeah, I think that was, again, one of the things for me, like originally when I first kind of coming to the game to then play it, in my head I was thinking, you know, like your caricature that you would see on something like The Big Bang Theory or whatever. So you're going, right, so it's a game but there's no real set plot to the game, and you know, kind of approaching it from that sort of PlayStation angle and you know, being a bit confused and going, right, what's kind of going on here? But then the likes of him as well, the fact that he's not into PC games, mobile games, PlayStation, you know, whatever, and that you're going, right, well, he's probably not going to be into this, you know, because it's a kind of not your standard way of playing a game. But one of the first things that I kind of clicked with it is I went, right, playing D&D is kind of like turning up to one of those murder mystery weekends where, you know, there's somebody and they're talking to you one minute, somebody turns a light out and then they're lying in the ground and, oh no, they've been murdered, you know, or whatever it happens to be. And then you've got that group of people going about trying to solve whatever, you know, fake murder or whatever's happened. When I kind of seen the sort of similarities between the two, I went, right, okay, I'm kind of getting this a bit more now. So for the likes of him, it might be more of the puzzle element, more of the challenge element, more of the figuring out part of it, rather than the game element of it. Certainly
the drinking element was a factor for the guy, I know that's for sure. And then but when we played Alien, and the guy's like, my two favourite films are Alien and Aliens. I went, perfect, this guy is going to love this. It's bloody, there's aliens, there's guts, there's fear, and it was good. So, but ultimately, if I came in super strong with that guy, or if I made it sound like he had to commit to games because he was joining this one game, now it was a big game, but you know, this is a new guy, and I did put as much time as I could, even though it was very busy, to kind of help him with the rules and stuff and encouraging role play. And he cracked out some awesome role play and stuff. I was like, I did not expect this. Now maybe it was because he was drunk, but it doesn't matter. He still enjoyed it and he still remembers it. So I think for me that's important. Just allow for pass-throughs. I think kind of moving on, people to pass through the gaps and let them pass through the gaps. Don't clutch at the last bits of their hair that's falling through the cracks. Just let them go and don't be weird about it. I think moving on, I think for me as well, having regulars, and this is quite, for us we knew we were going to play most weeks, but for some of the other, like I mentioned that guy there, I was surprised was interested. He's maybe now going to be a regular, but that's a whole group of guys that it kind of came out of that, let's try one game, and now it's became an incredibly hard set of games to juggle when you've got full players, or not enough seats at the table to actually have them. But a big starting thing for us, and it's worth, if you're starting a new group, maybe trying to put the feelers out for this, but don't force people to commit to it if it's quite a lot of games. But regulars, in my opinion, can be any time. It doesn't need to be every single week. It could be once a month. I think I've said this already. In the case of the guys I just spoke about, it was literally, when can we play a game? It's probably on average going to be every 6 weeks or something. So, and it wouldn't be every 6 weeks on the dot. It might be 7 or 8 weeks, or it might be maybe twice in a row, and then nothing for 8 weeks. So, but we knew that going in. So I planned games for that, like not expecting to see them. We just check in at the start of the week or like middle of the week and just see, are we able to do this, and that's fine. But that's still a regular group. Just because it's an irregular time or schedule doesn't mean it's not a regular group of guys, or it's not the regulars or the boys type thing. So I think that's worth thinking about. I don't know if there's anything else to add though. It's quite plain English, that, but
yeah. So I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier on in this episode, and I think maybe in our kind of getting started, either playing or running, I can't remember which one, but kind of one of those episodes, you need to think about your group from the point of view of what is so-and-so's 100%. So for the likes of myself just now, my 100% is turning up once a week. That is because I physically can at the moment turn up once a week. But if it was somebody who works shifts and has got a young family and whatever else, if they can only turn up once every 3 weeks, but in order for them to turn up once every 3 weeks, they need to arrange somebody to look after their kids, that they're having to pay to do that, and that because of work and other things that they can only do that once every 3 weeks, then them turning up once every 3 weeks is their 100%. So it's so easy, and it's so easy with the way that the world is, that everybody focuses on time and people focus on themselves, and they go, well, I'm here every week, and I'm here every week, whereas you're only here once every other week or 3 weeks, or whatever it is. But take a step back and look at that other person and ask what their 100% is. So somebody that's doing that, as an example, going back to that, somebody has to arrange childcare and whatever else. Not only are they taking their bit of free time that they could be spending with their family and whatever else, but they're also having to financially commit to pay a babysitter to look after their kids, or whatever it so happens to be, to then turn up at that game. So for somebody that's doing that, for then somebody else to be at the table and sit and going, drawing them daggers all night because they're going, oh, you're only here once every 3 weeks. I mean, how committed are you? Well, they are, much more committed than that person who's maybe turning up, 2 out of 3 weeks. If you look at it from their point of view, because they can turn up every week, but they're doing that, well, they're on 66% attendance rather than 100%. So that's personally what I mean by what is their 100%. And again, even just generally in life as well, I think that people could do that a little bit more, take a step back and ask themselves, well, what is this person committing to? And what does that actually mean for them, that level of commitment?
Yeah, I think you'll probably find, if you've got somebody that is a bit like using that example, because you might have that. I've certainly seen that with the groups in the local comic shop, where one of the guys that was running stuff was moaning because somebody couldn't make it and all that, and he's like, I designed games around this character, and he's done this, I've known him for 2 years, and he does this all the time. And I was like, we should know better if you've known him for 2 years and he does it all the time. Like, don't make stuff, I mean, it's not hard, just switch the character out, you just change the guy's name, it's not a big deal. but he get quite annoyed about it. He kind of eased off a bit. But if you find people are a bit like that, they're probably not worth actually having in a group. See, if you're going to get people that are just going to be toxic, it's not worth it, because over time that's going to bleed into everybody else. Like you're saying earlier, where it's, if you have somebody that doesn't want to play, or they come in and they're all super obstructive, or cause havoc every game, or argue with people at the table. I've seen that before, and I've just had to be like, you zip it kind of thing. I've had to kind of really put my foot down a few times with certain characters, but those sort of folk, you need to be careful with them. And like, one thing I would almost encourage them to do is slip through the cracks if that happens, because I've had people blasted at tables because they couldn't handle their drink, and then they fell asleep, and it's like, okay. But I've had people argue at tables as well, and I've had to just tell them to zip it and get people out, because it's made others at the table uncomfortable. But now some of them have been with and not with regular groups of players that we've had too. But certainly if you're making a group of guys, they're early warning signs if you're going to get it. It's not worth having them in. If it's your pals, it's maybe a bit different. But if you're going out your way, and maybe I know people that go into the social media platforms and say, I'm running a game of Alien, let's say, it'll be 3 games, who wants to play, or we're going to run regular games every month from this time onwards, and we want 6 people. You will see that, and if you do something like that, then it'll be a bit harder to figure out if that person's going to be a regular worth keeping. But certainly one thing not to neglect is make sure you're having fun with it as well. If you feel like you're getting trampled on every week, or nobody's listening, or everyone's taking the rip out you, or if you think a player's getting the rip taken out of them all the time, it's certainly worth just think about it. Just keep at it. You'll weed out all the bad people, or they'll weed themselves out. At least that's what I've found. I've had a couple of groups that have been a bit of been difficult. And funnily enough, this is at the local comic shops and stuff, and you're getting strangers in most weeks, and you get people hanging on most weeks sometimes. But eventually they get bored, or they whatever, or they kind of get rid of themselves, and just let them do it. I think the main thing is just keep at it and try and have fun. That's what I would say if you're starting up a group. I think for me the big secret is just go with the flow. Don't make it a big deal. Don't make it weird. Don't force people to commit. If you've got a new player and they're not comfortable role playing, give them little bits to role play until they're comfortable, because I guarantee you they will become comfortable. And once they do, they'll probably be a regular, because now it's like having the black book of the bad stuff they've done. If they've role played at your table doing a borderline racist accent, then it's like, oh, that's in my black book now. They won't want to leave your group after that. But I think it's just worth going with the flow when you're actually going through these. We're kind of giving you our opinions, but ultimately you'll know better. You'll know best. Or maybe better as well. When you're sitting down with groups of people, and after a session you'll know, have I had fun? Now I think if it's a completely new group, you might not be sure if you've had fun, because you've maybe overthought stuff or worried about it. But the people at your table will probably give you an idea if they've had fun or not, and you'll know if somebody's sitting on their phone all night. Probably not for that person, but you'll find that person probably won't be hanging about. And again, I think just pretty much everything that you're saying there is the thing. If you're using, again, a bit of intuition, it goes a long way with this. So if you've got somebody sitting on their phone all night, and then at the end of the night they're straight out the door and away, chances are they probably didn't enjoy the game, and chances are they might not be back next time. But don't go out your way to try and kind of force them back in somehow, or whatever. So just go with the flow, roll with the punches, and again, like you were saying as well, stick at it as well, because if you're a new GM, DM, you'll need practice, just the same as if you're a new player, you need practice. And if you're an experienced DM or GM, then even though you've got that experience from the mechanical side of things and whatever else, and you might have experience with working with new groups, at the end of the day, because it's a new group, then you don't necessarily know how it's gonna pan out personality wise as well, because everybody's different. So although somebody is similar to somebody else that you've played with in the past, that doesn't mean that there's not some
individual quirk there that just doesn't quite click with, you know, your personality, or it doesn't quite click with your storytelling, or you know, whatever it is. So I think that's the kind of best things with it. Stick at it, and the worst thing you can do personally, in my opinion, is to try and go out your way to get somebody back who doesn't want to be there. Again, it's not that you go, right, well, you left after game 1, so you
how
know
dare you?
That's you. You're never coming back, and ever again. You know, that's not the case. You know, always leave the door open for them, and don't try and hold it shut when they leave. I think that's the best thing for it.
That's something I've not really kind of written anything for, and that's the whole thing. Like, there's certainly people that in the bigger group that I've been running for, there's certainly people that won't be regulars, but that doesn't mean they're not welcome to come back and play. Let people almost have their guest appearances. There's one guy that came in who's like, he wasn't that interested, I don't think, but he enjoyed it, and he makes it when he can, but it's one of these things, his work doesn't really allow for it. Yeah. But the guys that are the regulars, we plan around our games, and if the guy can make it, he can make it. And his guy gets, almost every week he's there, I give him a special almost guest appearance moment that brings his character back in, and then jogs on at the end if he's not going to make it or whatever, or at the start of the next game if he's not made it, he gets a guest exit as well. So it's just go with it. Again, go with the flow and kind of roll with those punches, and just, I think fundamentally you want to just make sure you're having fun with it, and as long as you find a group you're having fun with, you'll probably find to become regulars. I think that kind of summarises all my stuff, at least for creating your regular group. But there's maybe a wee, not even a closing point, but there's maybe a wee point that's jumped into my head when you were talking about I can't remember exactly which point it was, but it came into my head. Have you got any thoughts on, this is a wee bonus, have you got any thoughts on getting rid of someone that maybe is a regular but is a complete pest to the whole group? Have you ever had a situation like that? But probably not, because it's just really been us. But there's a local comic shop. There's certainly a couple of characters I can think of from the local comic shop stuff. Particularly the early days. It's not really a problem now, but I never really. Nice
save, by the way.
Yeah, I know. It's Jamie. It's Jamie's. But is there
send help?
Is there any kind of thoughts you've got on that? How do you, let's say there is, we've said let them slip through the cracks, but what happens if you've got that one persistent person that is a pest, but they won't leave? This is maybe a topic for another episode, because it's a sensitive subject, and I've certainly had to caution some players in the past, but it's not.
I think we could definitely expand on this as an episode.
Yeah, this is quite a fun.
The Beginner's Handbook's playbook, and then go, right, okay, so step number 1, this is what you do, right, okay. Off the top of my head, there's never been a situation that I've went, right, okay, we need to get rid of this person for the sake of the group. You know, there's never been anything that I've went, like the behaviour has crossed the line or anything like that. So in terms of actually physically engineering something, I've not had to do that, thankfully. But what I would say is, know who you are and be honest with yourself about who you are. And by that I mean, like, if you're a quiet person, right, and you try and avoid conflict, and you know, you opt for the path of least resistance and whatever else, right, don't then volunteer to be the person that's just going to be frank and have, you know, a straight up conversation with somebody, and that you're going to be the one that's going to kick them out, right? Don't confuse yourself with your character. That's what I'm saying here. I haven't told you this. Earlier on today, I was in the bus with my dad, and we were heading home, and it was absolutely packed. The amount of people that were on the bus that you're looking, and there's normally a little sign up and it says X amount of people seated, X amount of people standing, that's your maximum, and you're looking and you're going, I don't see that little sign, but I'm pretty sure we're over the number here. Anyway, somebody that was walking to get off the bus, everybody's having to kind of, you know, it's like a game of Tetris to try and get people on and off this bus. So anyways, that's happening, and there's a guy going to get off the bus, and let's just say his character he does not match his character, let's put it that way. So as he's going past my dad, he goes to shove him, which well, you know my dad and background, but that's basically not
his dad is Spec Ops. Not really. no, but basically it wasn't a clever thing to do, but as he goes to do it, it's one of those kind of, oh, hang on, he's a bit bigger than I thought he was, and he then kind of backs down from doing it, but then as he's doing it, he's like bawling and shouting, going off the bus, and you've got a bus full of people looking at this guy going, what on earth is going on there? Because he was doing the same thing down the whole length of the bus. Right. But the difference is, you know, when it's people that are, you know, pensioners and whatever else and things, you're going, right, well, okay, you can do that with them, but when it's somebody that is actually, you know, able to stand up to themselves or up for themselves, it becomes something totally different. So as a kind of total side shoot there, but basically don't fall in that trap. Don't think that you're the robust person that's going to deal with it. If you're the person that takes the path of least resistance, just accept that that's who you are. So either let somebody else deal with it, or, you know, try and subtly hint to try and change behaviour rather than going straight for the red card. But ultimately what I would say is, if you are the DM, then you, and again I think we've said this in our, you know, starting out as a DM episode, think of yourself as the referee, and you can think of that in different reasons in different kind of categories for that. So you're the referee in terms of, you know, making sure that the rules are followed in the game. You know, that's a kind of obvious aspect of it. The referee in terms of, if you've got player disagreement at the table, you know, nothing particularly dramatic, it's just person A wants to go on a quest, whereas person B wants to stay and rest up before they go on the quest so that they're prepared fully for it. You know, if you've got something like that, then you might need to step in and mediate a little bit there. But if you do get behaviour which has crossed the line, and again, different people will have different lines, then, you know, don't rely on the players doing it, because that again can descend into chaos, because the players in general will view themselves as on a level, as equal, because they're all turning up to play your game. Mm-hmm.
So naturally, as the DM, because you're making decisions about rules and things, people are kind of relying on your judgment. So if something like that is happening, then again, try and deal with that yourself. If you are a kind of relatively confident person or whatever, then great, go ahead, do that. But if you're a more timid person or whatever, and you've got somebody that's being passive aggressive or whatever, then, you know, don't panic about getting somebody else at the table that's a stronger personality to back you up, as it were. In terms of actual strategies and things, as simple as getting in contact with them and just saying, look, this is what's happened, and, you know, it's happened on X, Y and Z occasions. And again, try talk to them about it beforehand, so that then when you make a final decision, you can genuinely turn around and tell them, well, we've warned you in such and such a date, such and such a date, and such a date. And then it means that you're you're kind of covering yourself from that point of view. And again, there's nothing wrong with being direct. You don't need to be rude about it. You don't need to be aggressive or whatever. Just being direct normally can solve a lot of issues. Might create a couple initially, but as time goes on, it's dealt with, it's done, there isn't any repercussions. Whereas if you mysteriously at the last minute text them and go, oh sorry, I'm not feeling well, so I'm going to cancel the game tonight, but you've still got everybody else round at your house, well, sometime down the line they can find out about that, and then it's going to give you issues further down and things. So being direct is always going to be the best way of solving whatever issue you've got. And again, it's part practice as well, because sometimes people, when they try and be direct, they're blunt, and there's a difference between being direct and blunt. Turning around and going, I don't like the t-shirt that you're wearing. That's direct, that's saying it. But turning around and going, my God, that t-shirt that you're wearing makes you look like a homeless clown.
You can
okay,
leave.
you've
you
still
can get out of my house.
Okay, like with the two of them, ridiculous example, right? But you've conveyed with both of those statements that you don't like the t-shirt, but one of them's gonna make somebody more likely to cry.
I've got to be honest, I'm a direct guy, because I think fundamentally I've had players. Now you've maybe not had this experience yet, but I've had players that were communicatable to in tables, and it's just like, you need to wrap it. But I'll maybe divulge more details in a proper episode, because the thing is, you still need to be polite. Fundamentally, I've had tables where players have been upset because of it, and there's been visible stuff that's happened at the table where people have been annoyed or uncomfortable. But it's been with, maybe not, like I mentioned some of the guys before, the bigger group. We've had stuff happen at tables before, but it's never been stuff that it's not been like, oh sorry, and people have. But I've seen tables where it's been like, man, it's not even been a regular in some cases, which means you can just basically tell them to jog on, which has happened before. But there's been one case I can think of in the recent history, maybe a few months ago, that it was a regular that had done it, and I was like, this isn't going to slide. But it was a direct approach I took, and it was direct outside of the table. But we'll maybe talk about strategies for dealing with psychos at a later point. But it's certainly something. Let them slip through the cracks if they can, and if they can't, you can get rid of them in other ways, and you can hear that in another episode.
I mean, genuinely, I think it's worth maybe exploring that, because
it's a hard subject, and especially if you're not someone that's used to a lot of confrontation. In my job, I get a lot of confrontation. It's not like people have got stuff wrong. It's just you're usually working in focus groups. Or I come from a techie background, but kind of an advisory role at the moment. So there's a lot of, I wouldn't even say different opinions. It's like completely opposing opinions, and there's always conflict. But if you're somebody that isn't used to that, it can be very uncomfortable. But certainly tune in into a future episode to find out how you deal with the regulars or anyone that's a pest, to everyone involved and everyone agrees. That's an important one too.
And again we've kind of touched on it a little bit. If it's somebody that's a regular and it's a sort of a minor thing, but you need to deal with it, you need to nip it in the bud, that's going to be totally different to deal with than somebody who has literally turned up to your group for their first game and they've turned around and they've just like slapped somebody at the table, and they've then tried to claim that they were LARPing or something. There's two different kind of levels of tolerance that you've got for those two different situations, and what's appropriate to deal with. So it's it's probably worth more of a dive into.
I don't know if I can actually say one of them on podcast. I'll tell you one after this, right? But
okay.
It's not that bad, but I don't know if I should actually bring it up. But at another episode, but we'll talk about it between episodes. But I think that's everything from me. I don't know if there's any closing thoughts you want. I've kind of covered everything in detail there. So unless there's anything else,
I don't really think there's anything else. I think we've pretty much covered everything. Okay. Just to kind of summarise, if you're looking for a group, best thing is to try and go through your own personal groups, so friends, family, and again, work, school, whatever, right? Try tick them, because chances are you already know each other, which means you don't have any of the kind of ice-breaking stuff to kind of get to know people, to kind of then get playing the game and then everything that goes along with that. So try and do that as your first option. As a second option, you can then look out with that. So again, whether you're using different Facebook groups, whether again you trust us enough to use any of our stuff that's kicking about, whether you go on like an online tabletop platform, if they've got a section that you can search for games amongst all their members, and whatever, there's different options there. I would always make that my second choice, just for the reasons that we've talked about. And then, like Jordan had talked about, if you find that anybody is starting to drift, don't panic about it. Just let them go. Let them find whatever their frequency is going to be. Let them find whatever their level of commitment is going to be. And again, if you do that, then what you're doing is you're strengthening whatever your core group is going to be. At the same point, don't take the huff with them and stop them from turning up to future games because they're only turning up 1 in every 4 games or whatever. So always let them know that the door's still open. That point that I made earlier on as well, feeding into that, I try and ask yourself what their 100% is, and if you can answer that question, then it'll give you an idea for who in real terms your most committed players are. And again, you might be surprised if you haven't done that before. Now sit and have a think about it. What's everybody got going on in their lives? And then look at how many times that they're turning up and ask yourself, who's really your most committed player there. And again, just keep at it. Like anything, practice is going to make perfect. So keep at it from that point of view. And as well, if you keep at it, if you've got new players there, they'll eventually become more comfortable through repetition, which then means that they're more likely to want to play it, and the frequency is more than likely going to increase for you if you're wanting to up the frequency. But never try and push anything, and again, keep it relaxed. And I think that's pretty much everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's really just about, and you've heard this before, it's about keeping it simple. Just ask folk, and if they want to play, they'll play, and anyone that's not that great or doesn't want to play will disappear, and that's it. Other than the edge cases that we kind of started talking about at the end there. But I think that's really our take on starting up your own kind of group of regulars, so to speak. I don't know if you've got any thoughts that are different from this. Definitely hit us up in comments, or let us know if there is a Spotify poll. Let us know in the Spotify poll. We'd just love to see and just engage with you a bit to see what your experiences are, because it might, who knows, based on what you guys say, we might have revised episodes of some of the topics if there's something that we've learned, because this is just our experience. But sure, just definitely get in touch with us at some point. Anything else, maybe the socials? Yeah,
so again, we've got Facebook kicking about, we've got Twitter kicking about, there's Instagram there is
others.
Discord, that's the other one I was thinking of. So you can get in touch with us through them. Again, we've got a section on Discord, which is if you're searching for a group, you can click on that, or if you're a DM want to establish a group, that's there as well for you to fire away whatever it is that you're doing in there. And another thing as well, just whilst I'm thinking about this, if you've ever had an uncomfortable situation at a table where you've had to rein in some behaviour, or if you've been unfortunate enough to be in the position that you've had to get rid of somebody because of whatever the situation is, let us know about that as well, because I think doing a follow-up to this where we kind of look at different situations and what we think is the best thing to do would be interesting. So it'd be interesting to see what the situation was and how it resolved, and then maybe we'll get our take on that as well, so you could do that as well.
If it's not too fresh by the time we do the episode, I might have a couple of different I'm not saying I wasn't involved in all of them, but we'll see.
Some to all.
No, there's different approaches, so we'd definitely love to hear your take, especially in this episode, because that kind of will line us up for what we talk about as well, because it can contrast maybe with some of the stuff that I've maybe tried myself or seen people try. But anyway, thanks for listening or watching, wherever you are, if it's Spotify or YouTube. I think that's about us. So thanks everybody, and we'll get you on the next episode.
We'll see you then.